Hi, this is Introduction to Behavioral Science and its application to management. So I was in this 1 week course at Yale University where there were 6 amazing professors. All you can see their images here. And they taught us 1 hour early in the morning, 6 in the morning Pacific time. And there were 6 different areas of behavioral science. And I'm going to summarize them here on some of the key takeaways. So the first one was around experiences, and Professor Gail Zuberman, he shared with us how if a given experience goes this way in timeline, that it's very important to have peaks in terms of really good experiences in the beginning and also really good experiences in the end, because that's how memories are formed. People value experiences when they have a peak more than they value the duration. So, how you shape your product experience, how you shape your consumer experience is very important. The timing is important. What you start with, what you end with is important. So, sequence absolutely matters. So, if you're planning for a trip, if you're giving an experience to the consumer, if you're a hotel with service providing, or if you're a product with certain experiences in the beginning and certain experiences in the end are super, super important to keep in mind. Anxiety and uncertainty is something to avoid in these experiences as much as possible. If some things take time, give your customer illusion of control with something that they can do. Don't keep them waiting. Don't give them anxiety, because it causes a lot of fear and it reduces the quality of your experiences. And 2 other important concepts that I took away from this lecture was there's this hedonic reasoning as to why we do things, and there's also the reasonings of meaning and purpose. So hedonic theories, they have this root that our desires are prompted by pleasure seeking for our sense gratification. And so 2 key takeaways there is that when you give someone a really good experience, they have this stable standpoint at which they will come back to. So if you get something really good all the time, then that becomes normal and that becomes their state of happiness. So people adapt to good and bad experiences in a pretty solid way. So pleasure seeking is one reason why people do things, but there's also really good examples of why people have children and raise children, and why people are attracted towards well-being. There's meaning, there's purpose. So experiences can be shaped around these 2 characteristics: hedonic or meaning and purpose driven. So really interesting on how you shape experiences, sequence experiences, how you give your products in front of your customers, how you want to leave them with memory through the experience timeline. And by being aware of this, you can actually make the best out of it. Moving on to the second lecture, it was around negotiation. Negotiation. This was a really interesting lecture by Professor Daniel Kahneman. He structured the class in such a way that there was theory, there was prep materials, but there was also a real life negotiation in class. So there was a pair of 2 people, it's a buyer and a seller, and you actually did negotiation. So the key takeaways for me was negotiation is actually a good negotiation is when you get a deal that is better than your estimate or your reservation value. So going into a negotiation, you need to know what is your estimate, like what is it that you want to negotiate for. And so if you can beat your own estimate that, hey, I'm willing to negotiate until X level, and if you can beat that, then you are coming out of that negotiation in a successful fashion. So negotiation is about beating your own reservation value or beating your own estimate. And the key to negotiation is preparation. So if you want to do really good at negotiation, you want to prepare in advance. You want to think about your reservation value in advance, and you want to think about your opponent's reservation value in advance. And the way you do that is by having 2 calls. The first call that you do is when you find out what is possible. What is possible? Ask all kinds of questions. What are the boundaries? What are the priorities for the other person? What are your priorities? Just figure out the landscape. So that's the first call that you do in negotiation. The second call that you do is you negotiate within that range. And that range is actually ZOPA, Zone of Possible Agreements. So you want to know what the boundaries are. You want to know where you can push. You want to really understand. And if you are prepared and if you have learned the other person's sheet, as in other person's boundaries, other person's requirements and what they want, then you're actually going to be prepared. So preparation is the key step. Then he shared with us this XYZ technique. It says, hey, give me X or Y or Z, and I will sign this offer. Or basically, the way you do that is you give people options. You give them not just one, but 2 or 3 different options, saying, hey, you can give me a rent discount if you're trying to negotiate a rent, or you can give me like 6 months parking off, or you can, waive my deposit. So you give them options. When you give someone an option, they feel like you're considerate. And also the mindset of negotiation was the key learning for me in this, which is make the problem to be yours, not the other person. Say, hey, this is my problem. I really needed this X or this Y. If you do that, then I'm going to be perfectly happy with this, right? So make it your problem and make it a deal-making negotiation, not a deal-breaking negotiation. So if you go with the mindset of deal-making, saying, hey, I want to make this deal work, then they will actually negotiate in your terms. And the key insight there was also negotiate for what will help you to get your job done well. So if you can negotiate for certain things that can help you for your longer term success, then actually that's better. And so the structure was quite interesting. 2 calls, how do you structure it? The technique of negotiation, giving options. Learning and preparation is the key, right? And then knowing your reservation value. So really, really interesting set of learnings from this class as to how human beings behave, how human beings negotiate. And when you do these calls, see the tone, use the right tone, see the reaction of the other person, and be prepared and optimistic for all kinds of answers. That was the key. And then you'll be happy. So if you are actually getting a really good deal, don't get too excited. If you're not getting, and if you're punched on the face and if you're not getting what you want, then don't get too dejected either. Just be optimistic, take your time. So structure, preparation, and mindset. Really, really interesting learning as to how human beings behave and how you can be better off negotiating with people. Third lecture was around smart risk taking. And this was by Professor Nathan Nomsky. And really interesting learnings here as well. Risk is basically anything that is outside of our control. If there's any outcome that's outside our control, then that's risky. Human beings want control, but they simplify a lot of things in terms of how they process things. And we don't understand a lot of things, but we still want control. And that's why it's very important to assess risks in 2 different factors. Before a decision is taken, you want to assess risk. After the decision is taken, you want to mitigate risk. So before the decision is made, it's a gamble. You want to assess the risk. After the risk is taken, you want to frame it as a challenge that you want to overcome, and you want to work on execution and action plan. So let's take an example of risk taking. Let's say I give you an example today that says, hey, you have an option to pick between these 2 options. Option 1, you're sure to gain $1,000, right? Option 1, you're sure to gain $1,000. And option 1, sure to gain $1,000. Option 2, 50-50 chance that you either gain $2,000 or $0. What would you choose? Think about it. Option 1, $1,000 sure shot. Option 2, 50-50 chances of $2,000 or $0. Most people will pick option 1. It's a sure shot, $1,000, right? Now let me give you another option. You have a game where you sure shot will lose $1,000, or you would lose 50-50 $2,000 or $0? Which one would you choose? Most people, again, in this case, will choose this option, right? But if you now think about both of these examples together, you'll realize that they're the same problem. It just depends on what mindset you're in. If you're in a mindset of risk aversion, then this is what you will go with. If you're in the mindset of risk seeking, then you'll go with this option. And that's where there's this link of this example with this prospect theory by famous Daniel Kahneman of Thinking Fast and Slow. He says that, hey, where you are in this risk curve shapes who you are, right? So this is the gain function at the very top. And this is the loss function. So gain function at the top, green, and then the red is the loss function. So if you're in the loss function, you are actually risk seeking, because the 10,000 that you've lost feels much bigger than the 10,000 you could have gained, right? So here you are risk seeking, and here you're risk averse. So based on which frame you are in, you actually take more risks or less risk. Because gaining another $1 million when you already have $1 million, you're risk averse. You don't want to lose the $1 million. But if you have lost $10,000, you will actually bet and gain higher, and you'd want to take more risks, because then you can get to zero, because the slope of this curve is much steeper. The loss function is steeper than the gain function for the same period. So the key learning is that the upside is more valuable in the loss function, and it's upside less valuable in the gain function. So if you're in the top part, then you're risk averse and risk seeking. And that's where we all have experienced that losses loom larger than the gains. The same 10,000 that you've lost feels much bigger of a pain than the same 10,000 you've gained. So this area of risk is very important to understand as to how humans think of risk, because if you know this, then you can frame things in a very different way. And the words you use, right? The only difference is between a gain and a loss in this example was the word gain and loss. So the way you use the words puts someone in the risk seeking and the risk aversion frame of mind. So for example, if you want to activate someone to take risks, you would say, hey, we want to reach this quota. We have this quota, we would reach this. Then they'll be in the risk seeking. But if you say, hey, we have a goal to achieve this 10,000 customers, then you're risk averse. So you can activate different parts of human psyche by using the right words. The other insight was that if we isolate our decision making, then we make poor decisions. But if we think holistically, we can make better decisions. We tend to do isolated decisions primarily because it helps us with our functioning efficiently. We can make quicker decisions, and we cannot really process too many things together because it's too difficult. So we isolate, but then the thing to realize is that it leads to poor outcomes. And there are various examples in the class that really helped us to think holistically. And the other key insight, for if you were to take 100 small bets, and if you were to take 100 small risky bets, then you should take the one small risky bet as well, because if you add one of these up 100 times, you get the 100 risky bets. An example of that is flight insurance. Typically, you always get asked if you want to take a flight insurance. Most times people say no, and that's the one risky bet that you're taking because you wouldn't take it for 100 times. It is a good risky bet that you're taking, but realize that, hey, this is actually this can be painful. You cannot take this small risk when you can take this as long as it's a small risk. But if it's not a small risk, then it's a problem. I'll give you an example. During the same time of this course, I actually decided not to take like 100% insurance on the car that I was renting. I took the minimum insurance because I was like, hey, what's the chances? When was the last time I ever had an accident? And in the last 15 years, I never had like any damage, none of that, right? But in this situation, I did have a small little, accident. And so in that, what happened was I thought I was taking a small risk, but it does feel bad. So as long as it doesn't significantly change your life, you should take small risks. Because if you do that, then overall you'll be better off. So similarly, bottom of the org, first line people should be encouraged to small risks, even though they themselves will not do better, but the organization will do better. And top of the org, the senior leaders should be encouraged to take less risk. So remember, as long as it doesn't change your life, you should be taking small risks all the time because it adds up and you'll be better off. It does feel bad, but if you get better at it, then it's actually good for you. The final few points, if the way you get better with risk taking is you get an outside view, like get some data, how a given risky situation has performed, similar situation has performed in the past. And then you also avoid availability heuristics. Basically, people make decisions based on ease of recall. You take a decision saying, hey, this worked really well in the recent past, it should work in the future as well. No, you should say, hey, what are the 3 good reasons and what are the 10 bad reasons, right? So you should write down, like, challenge yourself a little bit more and reward the process, right? Like, so when someone takes a good risk, reward the process, not the outcome, because the outcome could be bad, but the process could be good. They would have taken decision based on the information that they had, and then they acted in the right judgment. If they take right judgment, then you should reward the process, not the outcome. And one really, really good way to evaluate if you're taking a good risk is to use the wisdom of the crowds. And if you average, get everyone's input, and if you average the bets, you can really predict with a much higher confidence. And this has been shown over and over with Hollywood sales prediction, stock market prediction, recession prediction, election predictions, and a whole host of other examples where you can see like how the wisdom of the crowds can beat whether the decision is good or not. So in your team, if you're trying to make a good decision, get the group involved. You'll get diverse ideas, you'll get people to buy in, you'll make better decisions because you'll have a balance between risk seeking and risk aversion. But remember, when you involve a group, there is bound to be group polarization and echo chambers and naysayers. People don't like to be naysayers. People tend to be echoing other people's thoughts and this group polarization. And there's this boss effect where people just say what the boss wants to do. So the way you avoid all of this is you try to get independent opinions voiced asynchronously offline, and then encourage everyone to say no or dissent, encourage dissent, and then deliberately put all the points together once you have gotten most of those points out. So wisdom of the crowds, outside view are 2 really good ways in which you can evaluate if a risk is good or bad. So prospect theory, risk taking, risk aversion, risk seeking, really, really important aspects for us to use on a day-to-day basis. Taking small risks, avoiding the outcome alone, and using the process and meriting the process. So that was the 3rd lecture, Smart Risk Taking. The 4th lecture was by Shane Frederick, where he shared with us framing effects, context effects, and choice architecture, where he shared with us system 1 and system 2, that we all have the fast thinking system, which is system 1, and slow thinking system, which is system 2. Where system 1 is intuitive, automatic, effortless, which is used for majority of our use cases like photo recognition. It's very complex, but we can identify people's photographs, and we can quickly make decisions based on emotions. And system 2 is like which requires math, things like calculations, reflection, deliberation, efforts. It's much higher in system 2. So we all have the system 1 and system 2. System 1 is what we use most of the time, and it's based on the emotions. System 2 is what we use some of the time because it's expensive. So for example, if I were to ask you, how long would it take to drive from San Diego to San Francisco? And if I were to ask you the same question in a different way from San Francisco to San Diego, two groups will have different answers. And if I put this on a map, and if I ask you with the map going from SF to San Diego, the estimates will be much smaller than if I were to show the same map going from San Diego to SF, because system one comes in with the judgment that there's this gravity, people can go down faster from SF to San Diego. Think about it, put it in a map, you will quickly realize that your system one comes in, responds really quick, and biases system two. So knowing which system is being activated by the products that are being offered outside in the market and how your systems are being compromised is very important. And this is covered really well in Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman as well. So a few examples that were really interesting. It's sequence activation. So in a given resume, if you find terms, the first line that says this person is intelligent, and then you find out who is critical, it's like, oh wow, this is intelligent and is critical, and then impulsive and then stubborn, you will start to frame positive reference for this person. But at the same time, if you find the first line in this resume saying he's stubborn, oh wow, oh, stubborn, and then impulsive, and then critical, and then intelligent, then you're just going to have a negative frame of reference. So sequence activates your system and then biases you, so it's important. The second one is decoy effect. If you see on Amazon, 5 items are at sale for $95, and then right below, if you scroll, you see, hey, 10 items for $99. Oh my God, you're going to go buy this. Why? Because of this decoy. It biases you to saying, hey, if you were to get 5 items, you're going to pay $95. So it's already setting your expectation high. So that's decoy effect. So it sets system one is activated and biases system two into thinking. Even though when this 5 items is more than enough than what you need, you probably need 1, but you end up buying 10. Progress effect, right? So if you get a car wash with this 9 labels and you do your first car wash versus if you get a car wash with this 3 stamp label with 1 progress already done, then you're going to go to this car wash more often saying, hey, I'm already 30% done. I'm going to go take more car washes, right? So progress effect. System 1 and system 2 can be activated in different ways. If you add broccoli to your lunch menu, just show broccoli, image of a dish with broccoli in it, system 1 will tell you that, hey, the calories are reduced. Actually, that's not the case. If you add broccoli or any greens for that matter, calories are going to go up. So, and if you want to activate system 2, you want to give some sort of caution, you want to give hints, right? And various examples of activating certain systems. Power or defaults, right? So if you have default organ donation on, then you get 99% participation. But if you ask people to opt in, which is to ask them to use your system 1, you get 15% participation. So defaults have a huge power to play. Power of timing and context. So if you are showing someone who's going through a pretty heavy airport screening, an ad of a train that says, hey, you can get there at the same time without all of the screening, you're actually going to influence a lot of people to take the train ride next time. Similarly, a job ad when someone's fired, right? So when you show an ad, how you activate people's system 1 and system 2 is very, very important. And remember, system 1 influences system 2, which is the reasoning. Our gut reaction changes. So that's why people also say, hey, the first impression is important, progress is important, expectation setting or context is important, sequence is important, right? So this is all about various systems that we have within us. Fifth one, influence and persuasion. And there were 3 triggers that were really useful for influence and persuasion by Jo Chance. She told us pretty interesting thing is that ease is more important than something that's easy is more powerful than something that has higher net promoter score. That's even better than something that has better customer satisfaction. So someone satisfied, great. But if you can get them to be a promoter, even better. If they can think of your product as the easiest to use, that's the best thing. Like, for example, Amazon, with one-click shopping experience has revolutionized ease. They've also had buttons now. You don't even have to click. You just click that button and it just ships your products. The second trigger is moment of truth, which is like if you're in an emotionally charged situation, let's say Slack had an outage. At that time, if there's a Teams ad running, then that's the best way to get people moving from Slack. Or you basically like take an issue and make that as an opportunity, right? And in some emotional moment, like let's say COVID situation, and in the United Airlines case, there was this big scandal where a doctor was booted out, right? So everyone's waiting for some answers. So there's an emotional need. So there's a moment of truth where people are emotionally connected, but there's no solution. You can use that issue and make it an opportunity. Yeah, so Southwest did that. They actually used this opportunity to say, "Hey, we fight our competitors for lower fares, not with customers," right? So something like that. They gave a pretty big ad at that time. And yeah, basically it's about framing crisis into an opportunity, right? So that is framing. If you can frame things at given moments of truth into the issues that are an opportunity. Similarly, like an example of moment of truth that we wrote a paper on, my group was in Costco. And how if you were to ask for donation, how certain providers give really good checkout experience, like Waitress. And as an example similar to Costco in the UK does something pretty bad. Like they ask you at the very end saying, "Hey, you want to give donation?" It just makes it very hard. Your system 2 has to be activated to decide yes or no, how much money. System 1's already like in autopilot shopping. So system 1, system 2, important. It's not easy. The moment of truth of making a decision is hard. So influence and persuasion actually at checkout can be pretty bad if you're not doing it right. But Waitress does it really well. It's a default experience. It's easy. It's empowering you as well to make a donation. So it's a really good paper that we wrote together. And finally, Behavioral Finance by Nicholas Barberis. He shared some insights around how these three factors, overconfidence, over extrapolation, and prospect theory, they help us explain these questions as to why people trade so much when they know that they're going to lose money. And there's UC Berkeley professor Terry Ordine, who's done a really good research on Robinhood data published in 2021, how people lose a lot of money and what causes bubbles, stock market bubbles. We see like asset price moves up and down and up and down. Why are there so many M&A activities when we know most of these are bad bargains for the buyer? So he says that there's three factors: overconfidence, over extrapolation, and prospect theory that explains why humans they overplace their estimate. They overplace themselves as above average. They have higher confidence in their precision. They look at recent past performance and that is good, and then they extrapolate that, hey, this has to be going to be good in the future too. So overconfidence, over extrapolation, and prospect theory, which we looked at earlier too, loss aversion and risk taking, is humans love this, anything that's lottery like, and then they overpay when they do this, right? So it's very important for us to play devil's advocate, to invert when we extrapolate, and remember that there are these momentum over reversals. Like for something that has gone up for 6 months, there's a higher probability actually to go up, but vice versa for 3 years period. So really good data that shows how we extrapolate. Momentum gets built, plateauing happens, risk aversion kicks in, reversal happens, undervalue happens, and so cycles happen over and over. So those were some of the summaries. So 6 lectures from the Yale GNAM program on behavioral science. It really helps us understand how humans behave and how we can use some of this to our advantage to give them really good experiences, to help negotiate in a way that makes good practical sense in a win-win for everyone, enables us to take risks in a way that is rational, and make sure that we can understand the two types of systems that we have, that we can use them well, that if our competitors using it against us, that we can use it at our advantage. How to use influence and persuasion, 3 different triggers, and finally how we can overcome overconfidence, overcome over extrapolation, and overcome the lottery like experiences that we all participate in by being better behavioral rational human beings. Thanks.